Hey Angus.
G'day, g'day. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Hey Angus, can you hear
Hello.
us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello. Hello, we're just testing if it works. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, that's right. It's a bit noisy. So I'm going to get, and you want to just put it down?
Sure.
Angus, I'm going to get a few people to come and say hello to you before we
Oh,
start
very
the
good.
call properly.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay. Yep.
Sarah, where's Sarah? Yeah.
Hey, Jesse.
Sorry. I'm only over 6 foot. Discrimination against you.
Hey, Sarah. How you
Do you
doing?
recognise me, Angus?
I do. Great to see you.
You can't see. It's important. I've got pink hair.
I can
That's
see it. It's very
fantastic.
nice. Angus, how was
Hey, g'day. How you guys doing?
Lovely to see you.
Good to see you.
Was he watching the service?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Angus, what did you think of the service?
That was very good. Yes. I liked it.
Come on,
Your round
surround sound.
Blimey.
The neighbour can hear you perfectly.
Excellent.
Oh, we're so sad you can't be here, Angus. We miss
Yeah, I'd
you.
love to be there. I'd love to be there. Yeah. That's right. Hey, Deb. Hey, Jesse. How you doing?
I've braided my hair. This is not natural.
Excellent.
How are you?
Yes, good thanks. Good thanks. Very good. Hey, Greg.
Very good couple of poems they were.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah.
How many rehearsals? Before
Yeah,
you finally down?
did it once or twice.
A few people have suggested a career for you in audiobooks.
Oh, blimey. I'm not sure about that.
Just coming in for a way.
Here you are, Sarah coming for way.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you,
I'm
Sarah.
good, thank you. We've decided you need to have a second career in reading Audible books. You've got a great voice for reading out loud.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, say hello to Angus.
Okay.
Before
Angus.
we technically started the call.
Elaine.
Hello, how you doing?
Younger with sunglasses on, but it's still me.
Hey,
Nice
Kat.
wrinkles. Great readings.
Oh, well,
really
thank you very
good.
much. Thank
And
you.
your sister did you proud.
No, she did very good. Very good job, and that was. Absolutely.
Did you really proud. So, lots of love to you and the family.
Cheers. Take care.
Here comes Sal. Say hello.
Hey, Gorgie. Cheers, Val. I inadvertently wore this today. Make sure sister
Oh, that's very
kindly
cat.
gave me.
That's very cat, that one. Yeah.
Is it from the picture?
Yeah, that's definitely her colour. Hey, g'day, mate. How you doing? Long time no see.
Oh my
Angus.
Oh, it's
Our camera, so we can just look.
ages. How you doing?
Angus,
Let's look like G.
Angus, can you hear us?
Yeah, yes, I can. There's a few talking on the call, so
Yeah, okay, I might talk quite noisy now, so I might, I think most people are on mute there. I think it's 1 o'clock then, not 5. Angus, I'm going to start properly and shut everyone up at 1 o'clock. If
Yes,
that's all
no
right.
problem. No problem.
And I'll say a few words and then I'll get you to talk, all right, when everyone's
Very
quiet.
good. Very good.
All right?
Bloody good to see you, mate.
It's great to see you, Paul. Cheers.
Right, I'm just seeing who's on. We have got David. Oh, David, you made it. Deb's hi, Lawrence hi, Ropes hi. Oh, and Karen, lovely girl. Hey, Karen, how are you? How are you, Ropes? Ben, lovely to see you. Is David there? Yes, David. David is definitely on here somewhere. I can see David Slater's. Yeah, you gone.
Such a beautiful service, Mugs.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, look.
Hi, Debbie. Hi, Dad. You served before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely shirt.
This?
You can move across.
Hello, Angus.
So you can see yourself
Yeah.
now, that's right?
Right across.
Yes, Angus. Yes, my lord.
There.
Yeah. Guys, could you
Well, you can get them.
Andrew?
Do you ask Angus if he can see us?
Yes, I can see you.
I can see you. Yep.
Okay.
Are you?
Well done,
Andrew?
Angus. How are you?
Yes, very good, thanks. Very good.
Okay.
So,
Angus, how's the family?
Yeah, everyone's good, thanks. The kids are in bed already, unfortunately, but we're all good.
In bed. What time is it with you?
It's about 9:30 in the evening for me.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Yeah.
maybe everyone go on mute apart from Angus for a minute. All right? Because you can go on mute too.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that much.
All right. So, everybody, thank you so much for joining online. Thank you, everybody, for coming back here to celebrate Cat's life. I know that a lot of you who are now on this call couldn't be in the chapel with us and couldn't actually join us directly, but you saw the service online. And I was very keen to give an opportunity for people to really share a little bit of Cat as much as they wanted to. So I'm going to start in a minute with Angus, and I know that Cat's boss is now very kindly going to share with us. We've all wondered what the Cat does for a living. Share a little bit about Cat's work life with us. And I also want to offer an opportunity if anybody wants to just share a funny story of their experience with Cat. It would be lovely. We'd love to hear that. And for people here, in the other room, there's also some little cards and some pens in it. And I just want, over the course of the afternoon, and sorry, you guys, we've all got drinks and food. Sorry, missing all of that. But I just want you to share. If Cat were here today, what would you just want to say to her? And write it on a card for us. And I'd love to be able to keep those for the family. So that would be nice. So Angus, are you good? Can I hand it over to you to do a little bit more of a eulogy and a bit more on Cat?
All good, if everyone can hear me all right.
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Well, thanks, everybody. Before I get going, I might just point out that when I come to the end of my little talk, I'm going to invite everyone to join me in a toast to Cat. So if your glasses are empty, now's the good time to top them up as I'm speaking.
Well, there's a rough action here, Angus.
Nikki just made the
Excellent.
last hymn, so I'd be very worried about that.
Okay, well, I'll get going then. So where to begin? Cat was born, of course, on the 27th of June, 1957. And as a fairly recent parent myself, I can imagine the excitement and joy that Cat must have brought into Mum and Dad's life when she arrived. By all accounts, she was a very cute baby with curly locks of copper gold hair. And Mum used to get stopped in the street by strangers to admire Cat's good looks. Then Moggy arrived a short 20 months later. So then there were two. Obviously, I don't have any personal recollections from this period, but in looking back over the family photos, as I've been doing, understandably, over the last few days, I get the clear impression that these were very happy days indeed. There were visits to grandparents, picnics in the New Forest, days at the beach, and horse riding. Cat and Mog were always well turned out and usually wearing rather chic matching outfits. Moggy recalls that whilst they got on very well, there was actually an element of sibling rivalry. Usually, Cat's better developed verbal skills at that age and sharp tongue goaded Moggy into whacking her. And it's amazing that I can see very similar behaviour in my own sons, Finley and Lewis, right now. So even at an early age, Cat displayed an independent streak. As a toddler, Granny Mac was once fussing over her and she lashed out and said, "I can manage." And that was very much how Cat was later in life as well. And then a few years later, when Granny Gray, the other grandmother, was babysitting the girls, she tried to change TV channels one time to put on the news that was her favourite programme. And Cat immediately announced, "Granny, in this household, we watch The High Chaparral." And for anyone who knew Granny Gray, they'd understand how brave that was, because she was certainly a formidable character. In 1966, some 9 years after Cat was born, I finally arrived on the scene. And I was actually born at home in the early hours of the morning at about 3 a.m. or thereabouts. And upon my arrival, the doctor who had delivered me called out to my father, who was waiting downstairs below, to announce that he had a baby son. And by all accounts, a great cheer went up from the girls' room at that news, despite the very late hour. And apparently they were both keen to have a young brother rather than another sister. So throughout my early years, on long car trips, I would sit between Cat and Moggy on the back seat of the car with my arms around them and call out, "My girls, my girls." And that's very much what they were to me. And we've got so many happy memories of that childhood period. Now, moving on, Cat was a very gifted student. She actually wrote her first play at 3 years of age, and it's quite a short play, so I'm going to read it to you now. Act 1, Scene 1. You are sitting on a snake. Oh, am I? Then I had better get off. So that was it, the end. Brief but to the point, but quite creative for a very young person of that age. So Cat initially attended West Lodge Primary School in Pinner, and she later went on to win a scholarship to the prestigious Haberdashers' Ash School. And Mum and Dad were very pleased by this and treated Cat to a lunch in the restaurant at the top of the post office tower. Although Cat was a top student, it seems that there was some room for improvement in her organisational skills. At one parent-teacher evening, Cat's form teacher noted that if only Cat could get herself to the right place at the right time with the right books, she would be unbeatable. And of course, later when Moggy also went along to the Habs, she was greeted by the teacher's rather ominous, "So you are the other McIntyre." Cat had definitely set the scene for Moggy at school. So whilst Cat excelled academically, she was rather sport shy, it has to be said. However, I do remember being impressed by the news that as a teenager, she'd taken up fencing as one of her school sports. From my youthful perspective, this seemed to be very swashbuckling and exciting. But of course, I later found out that this was actually the soft option that kids took to get out of actual aerobic exercise. But in fairness to Cat, she was pretty heavily asthmatic, so she couldn't go too hard on the physical activity. As a teenager, she was also very good at playing the piano, and I certainly recall the house being filled with the sound of her playing. Although one of her favourite and perhaps over-practiced pieces eventually became referred to by Dad as Balls to Mrs. Banglestone. She was also a very good horse rider, but was eventually forced to give this up due to her asthma, which made her allergic to horses. Cat went on to attend Birmingham University, where she read ancient history and archaeology. And she really enjoyed her student days, living in real student digs. And of course, ever thereafter, she could put on a wicked Brummie accent. She made some great friends at uni, in particular Sue, who I can see on the call at the moment. She stayed in touch with Sue over the years and frequently visited her in France. And as previously mentioned by Moggy, her professor once prohibited her from participating in a field trip to Iran, which she became quite feisty about. But in its place, she did go on a museum study trip to Greece, although with her uni friends. However, this seemed to sort of morph into some island hopping holiday across the Greek islands. But I do recall that Mum and Dad were rather alarmed to receive a reverse charge phone call from Cat while she was on this trip. She'd actually lost her handbag with all of her money in it and got into a spot of bother with the Greek police due to suspicion of drug trafficking. And it later transpired that the suspicious substances that drew Cat to the attention of the Greek authorities were in fact her asthma medications. So no harm done in the end. At around this time, she took me on a camping trip to France over one Easter school holiday. Now, this may seem rather unlikely for those who knew Cat in later years, but I would have been about 10 or 11 years old at the time, and she would have been about 19 or 20, I would say. And looking back, Mum and Dad must have had immense confidence in Cat's capabilities to let the two of us go off on our own on a foreign excursion at this age. Keeping in mind that this was before mobile phones and the ready summoning of assistance if you got into a spot of trouble. Anyhow, I recall Mum dropping us off at New Haven to catch the ferry to Cherbourg and thence a train to Quiberon. We arrived at the campsite and pitched our tent. And for those who don't know, I should point out that Quiberon is located on a peninsula that juts out into the Atlantic Ocean. And of course, it's surrounded by the sea on three sides, and the weather can be fresh at the best of times. But on our first night, we endured gale force winds, and Cat got me up at about 1 in the morning and insisted that we turn the tent around as the direction of the prevailing wind had changed in the night and our tent was in danger of being blown away. So out of bed we got in the middle of the night and re-pitched our tent in the lashing rain. But I must say, in the next morning when we got up, we discovered that ours was the only tent that was still standing in the campsite and all the others had blown down. So kudos to Cat and her camping abilities. Then, of course, just a year or two later, I also recall another holiday we did to Brittany and Cat taking Justin and me on a bicycle ride through the French countryside. Another unlikely contingency for those who knew Cat in later years. But certainly in her younger days, she was up for these kind of adventures. After finishing university, Cat was not able to find work in her sphere of expertise, so she decided to retrain as a PA and attended a course at Uxbridge College. Her expert typing skills came in very handy when I subsequently attended university and needed a spot of help typing out my final thesis. So thanks for that, Cat. And she went on to get work as a paralegal at Glover's and subsequently at Linklaters. These first jobs in law firms really suited her as she could bring to bear her formidable skills of outlining a reasoned argument and crafting scathing letters. However, she spent most of her career working at the APCC, where she also put her skills to good use. As Mog said during the ceremony, Cat was always modest about her achievements at work, so I can't really provide a detailed account here, but with Cat, you always had a sense that she was keeping in check recalcitrant chief constables from several police forces throughout the country. And I understand she also worked closely with several members of the House of Lords to provide briefings on proposed legislation regarding policing matters. When Cat finished university, when I finished university, I took a 12-month working holiday to Australia. That was my first experience of Australia, and I remember enjoying that very much. But I was tremendously excited to hear the news that Cat and Paul were to get married. So I came home from that trip a few months early to attend their wedding in the summer of 1989. I certainly remember that as a wonderful occasion with a party in a marquee in Mum's back garden and the Blues Brothers in attendance to run the bar. And I'm pretty sure that there are several people there today that will also have good memories of that occasion. Cat and Paul had many happy years together, and whilst their marriage didn't last, they remained close for the rest of Cat's life. And I know that Paul has been absolutely devastated by the loss of Cat. Moggy and I both migrated to Australia in about 1997. And despite the physical distance from the UK, we both remained very close to Cat. We often spoke on the phone or over FaceTime, and we usually caught up a couple of times a year, either through Cat visiting us in Australia or us going home for a visit. And for me, memories of Cat during this time apart are vivid and fun-filled, as we were always on holiday when we caught up. However, for me to recount a few of these occasions to you, I first need to introduce you to the battered old Toyota Corona that I first acquired on my arrival to Australia. I think it was over 15 years old when I bought it, and had probably got about 150,000 kilometres on the clock. Nevertheless, Cat was game to travel all over Australia in it with me. I remember on one occasion, we drove in the height of summer from Adelaide up to Renmark on the Murray River. The temperature tops out at over 46 degrees centigrade. And of course, with no working air conditioning, we drove all the way with the windows open and jumped straight into the pool hotel when we, pool of the hotel when we arrived. On another occasion, Cat, Mum and I took a road trip to Melbourne and back again via the Great Ocean Road. And given that Mum was going to be travelling with us, I took the precaution of putting the car in for a service the week before we were due to make the trip. However, despite this, the car started overheating on the steep climb to get out of Adelaide. So I think we'd gone barely less than about 4 kilometres, and the engine was overheating. And we had to wind down the windows and put the heater on full blast to try and keep the engine temperature down. But we managed to make it all the way to Melbourne and back without incident, fortunately. And then, of course, there was the infamous trip that Cat and I did to Kangaroo Island. After having driven all around KI on dirt roads for several days, the car finally gave up the ghost on our way back to the ferry. But luckily, I joined the RAA rescue service, and they put us up in a hotel for the night and flew out a spare part for the car and had us on our way the next day. So we managed to get back to Adelaide in time for Cat to catch her flight back to the UK the following day. So in addition to her many trips to Australia, Cat caught up with us in many other places around the world. She frequently visited Mog and Greg when they were living over in Hungary. And I remember a wonderful trip we did to Venice to celebrate Cat's 50th birthday. And if you want to laugh later on, for those who are in London, you can ask Greg about our trip to Murano, or the fish supper that we had in the restaurant beside the Rialto Bridge. Those are tales worth telling. Cat also visited me several times in Indonesia, which was absolutely wonderful. And in particular, there was the great trip we had to Bali, where I was able to introduce Atha to Cat, Mog and Greg, and also Sue was there, I believe. And that was the first time that she'd met my family. So that was a very memorable occasion. And family was certainly very important to Cat. So both Moggy and I are extremely grateful that she warmly welcomed our partners, Greg and Atha, into the family, and also then went on to make such lovely speeches at our respective weddings. Mog already touched on this during the ceremony, but it's so important for us that I'd like to sort of say it again. And that is that one of the tyrannies of living overseas is the difficulty of looking after your elderly parents. So on behalf of Mog and myself, I want to acknowledge the enormous debt we both owe to Cat for the huge effort she put into looking after Mum over a period of many years. Whilst Mum was fiercely independent, she progressively required more and more assistance as she grew older. And Cat visited Mum practically every weekend in the latter part of Mum's life. She was also always on hand if there was an emergency, and that's something that neither Mog nor I could do from afar. And Cat took this burden on without complaint and retained her humour throughout. So that's certainly something I will never forget. During Kat's life, she took on many roles. She was a daughter, a sister, a cousin, a niece, a wife, a friend, a work colleague, and of course a kick-ass quiz team member. She's been at least one of these things to each one of us here today, I think. But in the last few years of her life, she took on one new role, and I think it's one that gave her great joy and happiness. And of course, the role she took on was that of Auntie Cat to our sons, Finley and Lewis. Not only do we have some great memories of Auntie Cat spending time with the boys, but also over the last few months of Kat's life, as she was bravely battling cancer, chatting to the boys on FaceTime or seeing snippets of video from their daily activities really brought a glint to her eye and perked up her day. And I'm so pleased that the boys could do that for her. So now I'm at the end of my words, and I'll invite you in a moment to join me in a toast to Kat. But before I do, I'll just say, dearest Kat, you've left us too soon, and we miss you greatly. But you live on in our hearts, and we'll carry you with us always. So, ladies and gentlemen, to Kat.
To Cat. Thank you, Angus.
Yes.
To Cat.
To Kat.
Angus, thank you so much for that. So, Angus, I'm going to open it up for people to speak in a minute. But I wanted to start by asking Susanna to say words about Cat. Can everyone go on mute, please?
Mute.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Susanna to talk us a little bit about Cat to understand the mystery of what Cat did at work. So, Susanna, come stand here. That's perfect.
Hello, Angus. It's lovely to meet you, albeit from a distance. Thank you for your lovely words. So Andy and I are here representing the APCC where Cat worked, and for Andy and I, it's amazing to have this little insight into Cat's non-work life, because like you've said, Cat was the most private person. So whilst we knew everything about Cat in the workspace, we knew nothing about this. So it's fantastic for us to get a chance to meet you all. And I have to say, it was just the most special thing when I got to meet you all the other day when you came into the office. But kind of Andy and I are really representing so many people today. Whilst we've been fortunate enough to come, we've had so many messages from police and crime commissioners, past and present, from people that work in policing, from all of the team, from the Home Office, from the Ministry of Justice, from all the people that have worked with Cat over the past 25, 30 years really. So I'm carrying all of that with me today, and love and best wishes from so many people. But people have shared lots of memories about Cat, and the same words come up again and again. Certainly sort of commitment, drive, determination, but also people have used some great words that when Cat didn't necessarily agree with some things that a chief constable or a minister might say, she could be a bit, my favourite word is pokey. And she could be a bit pokey with me sometimes, but always with a very great, good-natured spirit. But if she didn't agree with you, she let you know in a very sort of quiet, but you know, you left the meeting thinking, oh, okay, maybe I need to go and have another thing. And that was Cat. But she was a great team member, even though she was very private. She would always join all of our team away days and our team functions. And I remember the last Christmas party we had not so long ago, and of course it was a virtual Christmas party. We were all zooming in via our Microsoft Teams, and every member of the team I'd sent a little cocktail making kit. So we all made our cocktails at home, and Cat was busy making hers, and she kept rushing off to kind of do the various cocktail things. And we also did a Secret Santa, didn't we, Andy? And Cat's Secret Santa was a police officer's helmet, which she wore for the whole. You didn't have to know. You get inherited the very seriously. And she wore it for the whole time. And as people got progressively drunk, the police helmet was at a slightly jaunty angle by the end. But really, I mean, I've only been working at UPCC for 3.5 years, and for 7. But Kat had been with police and governance for about 25 years. And what she didn't know, it really wasn't worth knowing. You would get the most extraordinary questions in, very technical, quite niche. You know, what did the 1702 legislation say about the chief constable's responsibilities or something? And Kat would just know it. She would just know it. So we're definitely in a bit of a pickle now, aren't we, Andy? We get those questions in because the rest of us are floundering a bit. So there's a big cat-shaped hole that nobody will fill, and nobody should fill, because she was 1 in a million. Loved by all of us, and will. And we had a bit of a team gathering together when we heard the sad news that Kat had died, and we were trying to think what could we do to remember her. And for those of you that know where the APCC is based, it's in the most beautiful location. It's right next to Westminster Abbey, in the basement of the sanctuary buildings, and they are beautiful, very, very old. We're in the basement, so it's a little bit grubby, but nevertheless beautiful. And we have a meeting room where all of our chief constables and police and crime commissioners meet. And the meeting room is going to be called the McIntyre Room. From now on, we're going to get a nice sign to put on it. And we've already started talking about where should we be all these in the McIntyre Room. So not that you've got a chance to see it, and I want you all to know that. Really, Kat's memory will live on long after we all move on and do other things that will be called McIntyre Room. So it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you today. Andy and I, it's such a privilege for us to be here. And yeah, we will carry so many people in music. So thank you for the privilege of being here today.
Thank you.
I just want to give an opportunity for anybody that wants to add something. Maybe you could put your hand up. There's a hand up facility here. But I'll also ask people here if anybody wants to share a memory of Kat. Or I'm also going to ask for people here. I've got some. Did I say this already? No, I didn't. I've got some postcards just in the other room, and I would and some pens, and just would like to say, what would you like? And if you can write it on the postcard, then we can take you off the seat. That would be nice. So I'm gonna here first. Anybody would like to share something? So. So I can't wait. And she had to be a mermaid and be born. This way.
And she had to pretend to be a mermaid, and we had to like dive down and do different missions. And she probably lasted what felt like hours. And then she was like, right, I'm gonna get out now. Yeah, she was a mermaid with me for a very long time, and it was great fun. I think I made her keep her legs together and kick like with her tail. Yeah, very special memory.
Oh, bless. Lovely. Thank you. Anybody else want to share a little memory? Sarah's going to share something with us.
I'd just like to say it's lovely to hear about Kat's professional life. It's a thing I always think about Kat. She was always so pleased to see you. Yeah. You were like the one person that she wanted to sort of speak to and hear about. She was always so interested in you and not herself. Yeah. And she always remembered what was going on for you and her sort of attention to your personal life. I always remember that. So kind of thank you to her for being so generous and selfless in that she always made the focus about you. So
that's lovely. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Kat was like extended family, like a sister. Although I've been talking to so many people about Alpha and the dog on the rhinos, or Archie, and she was like a second mum to Archie along with Sybil. And over the years, I would just think Kat always had some wise words. I've been through some stuff, she helped me through, talked about different things the boys were going through. She'd always have an opinion, but she was so humble, and she was still so humble in those last few weeks, and she just kept her spirit up. I feel lucky to have had her in my life.
Oh, Debbie, thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody want to share anything online? Yes, Gillian, hold on, go ahead. You're on mute, Gillian, you need to unmute.
Is that better? Can
That's
you hear
better.
me now? Well,
Yeah.
our family and the McIntyres are cousins, and my dad had a farm, and they used to bring the children down while they were babies. We never saw much of them as growing girls, but I have one abiding memory of Catriona when she was just less than a toddler, and our family were visiting in Northwood, and we were all sitting out on a lovely summer's evening on the lawn, and Catriona was sitting there, and she had a toy telephone, and she spent about an hour trying to get the key in the bottom of the telephone, unsuccessfully, but she never stopped trying. She was so determined, even at that age, to try and get it. And this memory of her has lived with me ever since, in all the places I've been to, and my very different life to the McIntyres. And I'll take it to the grave, because I was absolutely fascinated by this red-haired child sitting on the lawn, just trying to see in the bottom of the telephone. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. That was lovely. Thank you.
Okay,
Justin wants to say a few words here.
There's only one thing I want to say about that is and not brought it up during the service, is the truth proceedings. There was very little point. There was very little point if Cat wasn't on your team of playing the game. There was very, very little point at all, because she would just, last minute roll in with only one pie left in the circle and answer the question. It kept on going on like that, and I'm furious with her. She should just go out for a pee or something at that time, and she was just absolutely chocolate full of knowledge, and you didn't know how she managed to attain it. It was just shocking. And she even knew about boy bands, for God's sake. How the hell does she know about that stuff? I don't know. So that is my abiding memory. Just an immense intelligence, and quite surprisingly charming with it. She was never, I know this. It was just off the cuff. Oh yeah, maybe, and it would be right. It was just wonderful. So I'll miss not having her on my team.
I realise you guys have been online for quite a while. So David, you've got your hand up. Would you like to say something? You have to come off mute.
Hi there. Most of you won't know me, but I was a cousin of Siv and Sheila. I'm a little bit younger than them by about nearly 20 years, so I'm nearer the age of Cat and Mog there. But two memories of Cat. One is that over the last sort of 10 years after our children left home, we always used to sort of do a little. We lived down in Dorset, and if we went up to Yorkshire, Burns home, we'd do a little detour and go and see Siv and Sheila. And I think nearly on every occasion we was there, Cat was there. She'd go and do their shopping, and it was great. What support she was brilliant. Yeah, the other thing I'll just say is that when Cat was diagnosed with her illness, I spoke to her on the phone on a couple of occasions. And what struck me was that she was so positive, didn't blame anyone, and just so practical, and just got on with her illness. She's really an admirable lady. That's all I can say. Well done, Cat.
Thank you, David. Anybody else want to speak? Oh, Sarah, come along.
I'd like to attest to the more gregarious side of Kat's nature and how she reflected that through her clothes and the bits and pieces that she picked up on her travels. And going back to her uni days, so this would be the late 70s, she turned up at my parents' house, and my mother was cousin to her mother, so she was second cousin to me, with a boyfriend, banged her of a car, with a denim jacket she bought on Carnaby Street. And the denim jacket was £10, and she paid a further £10 to have it splattered with paint. Your mother was horrified, and my mother was
That's a beautiful story. That's a beautiful story, Sarah.
That's lovely. Thank you, Sarah.
Hello everyone, I'm Sally. I've just found my messages from Kat. So when she came back from Adelaide was it?
Yeah, last year, a year ago.
2020.
Yeah, so
March.
COVID had just started here, and Mum and I went to pick her up from Heathrow, and it was just a bit bizarre because she couldn't get a cab and what have you. So we dropped her at the flat. She's a bit jet lagged, and went to Tesco Metro and bought us some stuff with our masks on. It was all a bit bizarre. And then I'm just looking at this sort of barrage of messages from asking her how she is, and she's just so lovely. Like on April 3rd, did Nikki make it back from Australia? It's all about, somebody said selfless, and this is what she was. I mean, yes, you did, darling. Been here for 14. Oh, wow. Hope you're not crawling the walls. I'm fine. I'm having trouble here with grocery online. So give us your full address. I'll have a go-to, Kat. Don't worry, my love. I'll work something out. I said, are you sure? There's bound to be a local delivery service. I'm happy to research, make a change from cancelling someone's holiday. Because, I'm in the travel business, so I have nothing to do. I'll be fine, thanks. Really don't worry. Okay, lovely. We're all out of this bag. I can deliver. Thanks. All of them is me sort of saying, and I know that Debbie and I, both said, Debbie and I were kind enough to invite her for Christmas. But all of these are just, hi, Sally. Sorry, I'm fine, thanks. Hope you're all okay. It's always, I'm doing fine, thanks. Okay, and okay for food at the moment. Hope you're all well. And it kind of breaks my heart that she didn't actually want our help. I mean,
She's very independent.
She was very independent, but we were doing this for the Moggy and everything. And sorry. Thanks to our cousin Ellen, who lives a bit nearer than you, can pick me up and we go, it's okay, it's okay. So, she's just such a lovely lady, and she didn't really want our help, did she? But we tried.
But she did, she appreciated it.
That's it, sorry.
Does anybody else want to speak? Just like this one, because I know it's pretty late in Australia now for you people.
Ryoka's got a hand up.
Oh, Roki, you've got your hand up. Come off mute.
Hello, everybody.
Ryoka, you're on. I said,
can you hear me?
Yeah.
G'day from down under, everybody. So I'm Greg's eldest daughter. Moggy is my stepmom. Kat was my sort of auntie. And I guess a lovely story that I would love to share is about when my cousin and I travelled to England back in the year 2000. It was our first international expedition as little green young'uns. And I think around that time, Kat had scheduled a visit back home to see Moggy or Angus, and she very generously offered us her flat in Victoria for about 3 or 4 months, rent-free. And I mean, you guys live in London, the cost of living. And that's the memory that I have of her generosity of spirit for this young teenager who she didn't really know or necessarily have any grounds to trust in her own house. But Ella and I felt very blessed and very loved by Kat and the entire McIntyre family. And that certainly stayed with us as our families have woven together. That's all.
Thank you, my darling. That was wonderful. I saw that your hand was up. one point. Did you want to say something? You're on mute, Leonie. Can you? No, I'm on mute. Can you unmute us? Hang on, we can't hear you. Just a minute, Leon.
I think she's up and down.
Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you now, my darling. You're frozen on us though. Can you speak again?
I'm up for reception because I'm in Broome. And
yes, just.
I don't. There's no good. You're frozen.
No, you're on mute again. No, she's not. She's frozen. Oh, she's frozen. Oh, no, we've lost you.
Anywhere.
Leon, you're on mute again.
I know. I've got really poor internet connection here, so you guys keep freezing when I turn my things off. I don't think the connection's
keep your
work.
video off and talk to us.
Okay. My first memory
keep your
of
video
Cat
off
was video is off. Can you hear me? Was not long after Moggs came out to live with Dad in Australia. Cat came out for a holiday, and I just remember being wowed by her very dry and wry British sense of humour. But then for Christmas, she just gave me and my sister the most wild, eccentric Christmas presents. I got a wraparound LED fairy lights outfit to wear to a rave, and I would have been 14. And I was just like, what kind of wild stories does this woman have? And the theme throughout Angus's beautiful eulogy and the funeral ceremony today was how important family was to her. And I had the pleasure of getting to know Kat and her mum and Moggie's mum when I was living in England, when Dad and Moggs were there. But even when I used to go back to England to visit my friends, Kat always made the effort to invite me out to visit her and Sheila and Sybil and put on a lovely lunch. And really make me feel included and welcome into their side of the family. And it was beautiful.
Thank you, Lance. That was lovely. Thank you. Lovely. Okay, you brought a tear to Greg's eye. You can't see it. Look, I just I'm conscious of having you guys on the line. It's late in Australia, so thank you so much for joining. If nobody else wants to say something, I'm going to let these guys go. And just remind everybody here, don't forget to write a little message to Kat at some point this afternoon. But thank you all so much for joining us online. Love you.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Moggy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
See you. Bye 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 bye. Love you. Bye. Yes.